Hi everybody. Thank you for joining us for this rather unique version of Inner Circle. Apologies if you hear dogs barking in the background or children not barking really, but children making noise because I'm trying to educate from home as well. So yeah, I will see how that goes. But thanks for joining us. Just want to do a quick, before we start, just a quick round robin of everybody so they can make their own introductions. Peter, should we go with you first, please, mate? Can you just let everybody know who you are and what you do?
I will do that. As it says in my bottom left-hand corner, Peter Hyson. The business is Next Chapter Retreats, and I work with business partner and wife, Hilary, who will be coming on in a moment, and this is my first time on the call. So great to meet you all. Thanks, Chris, for the opportunity.
No worries, good to have you on board. Jacqueline, do you want to go next?
Jacqueline Hall, family business coach, working with family-run businesses. I like to focus in on couples who are working together.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. Ian?
Hi, I'm Ian Braysher. I'm a business consultant. Two specialities are helping you to do things quicker and better and data protection.
Amazing, thank you. Really appreciate that. Simon?
Yeah, my name's Simon Lewin. I work for an organisation called East London Business Place. We provide free business support to businesses across London. As I said previously, we're spending a lot of time trying to support businesses through this very difficult time. And I'm sure as we get through this process, there'll be an element of reevaluating and considering how they can move forward. So we're there to support, and it's all free of charge. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate that. Hilary?
Hilary Rowland. Work with Peter, co-founded Next Chapter Retreats. The business is very much about working with individuals and businesses in transition. So for individuals, it might be a career change, redundancy, perhaps a medical diagnosis, retirement even. One of those crossroads in life where people say, I know I need to do something different, but I'm not sure what it is. And we give people a blank piece of paper, time, space, and attention to write their next chapter. But we do that with businesses as well.
Amazing, thank you so much. Charlie?
Charlie Goodman. I work with Chris. I help businesses with their employees, hopefully attracting the right ones and keeping the right ones through a mixture of employee benefits and well-being.
Amazing. And Wasim?
Hi Chris, thank you for inviting me in. My business is Ellswood Wealth Management, pretty similar to what Chris does. I just hope that I help people make better decisions with their money. I will be sitting pretty silently here in the background as an attendee. If my camera goes off from time to time, it's just because my wife needs help because she's got to call her patients and I've got to then look from time to time.
Yeah, no worries. That's all right. We're all trying to get used to combining childcare with work, I think. Definitely minus at the minute. I realised that I've definitely lost my vocation as a teacher. That definitely wasn't an occupation that I'm suited for. So I'm glad I know that now. It's all good. So what I want to do through the case study and just talk about sort of three particular areas really. Number one, from your particular professional perspective, what extra information would you want to understand from this family to help them? And then part two, we'll do that. We'll ask everybody the first question first. And then part two, what advice might you provide from your own particular professional perspective? And I'll invite everybody to get involved in the order that I've asked them to get involved, and I'll share some comments at the end. Peter, what were your thoughts on the case study?
I looked particularly at the first one, so it's Steve and Peggy.
Yeah.
And I viewed it rather more as a conversation. So
Yeah.
I got a whole lot of questions, not in any particular order, but things like what did Steve do between the army and the MD role? What did he find especially rewarding about being at work, and what did he miss? What does Peggy find rewarding? Talking to both of them about if money were no object, what would they do over the next 20 years?
Yeah.
What's their purpose in life, and how would they like to be remembered? What do they want their money to do for them? And when you're at your most excited, energized and focused, and when are you both at your least excited, energized and focused?
Yeah, amazing. Okay, great. So we'll come on to what might happen when they answer those questions in the next bit. So thank you for that. Jacqueline, what were your thoughts in terms of what else you'd need to know?
From them, I think my questions for the first two people was more or less the same as Peter. Yeah. I think, Peggy, what does define keep brain ticking in the context that context that she's in? Because she's there, but she's not financially motivated. Will she be able to go back to what she's doing once unlock happens? Is there likely to be more demanded of her, and how will she deal with it? Their personal challenge, what do they want as a unit and individually, and how closely related are those needs and desires?
Are you saying that potentially their needs and desires might be different, and is it worth it?
Yeah.
Individuals? Yeah, fair.
They've been together a long time. They're not glued together, but they. What's been their norm up to this point? What do they want to keep? What do they want to get rid of? What interests do they share? Virginia and Tony. Virginia and Tony. How far have they got with this? They're worried about this EU grant drying up. Their technology, so they can be based anywhere really. Do they want to register business in EU? Implications for tax? Have they tapped into the Horizon 2020 funding, starting to research that, because that's for funding for research and innovation. That's groundbreaking.
Okay.
Graphene is meant to be this big groundbreaking technology going into all sorts of areas. So exploration for them.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's as far as I got.
Cool. No worries. Really good. Ian, thoughts?
Suppose on the financial side for Steve and Peggy, all the calculations exclude anything from Peggy, so that might be interesting to add to that. What pension there would be from her wage, albeit small. The occupational pension at Aviva, I guess, how easy would that be to transfer to a SIP? And as far as being worried about the state of the investments with his army pension, as you said, Steve, leave the pension alone and then decide what to do with it. I think same as Peter said, find out what their interests are, because that will probably determine how they can spend the time apart from each other. Virginia and Tony, interesting. Of course, there's big concentration risk at the moment from commercial revenue, because they've only got one. They've got in the making.
Does the gallery view, does that show everybody?
Probably both of them, of the two new ones, are worth pursuing, because if you put the graphene technology in with the self-test kits, then they'll probably need to have the microscope to develop a self-test kit, for example, for corona or any other diseases that are coming along. Scientists, well, they will have a choice, of course, furlough some of them, all of them, and a choice to make up salaries or not. I think the most interesting one for me is the last one, Tony in Virginia. There's a mixture of employed and self-employed, so they can't do anything really about the self-employed. It's down to the government to contact them, for them to get the financial support for the employees. What's it, munch and nibble? Then again, they've got a choice of doing the furloughing or not. But also they're a bit of a unique opportunity to move into delivery, as well as just sitting back and thinking about doing corporate events. So there's a diversification there that they could make really good use of potentially. It doesn't say what the mix of salary and dividend is when they say they've got enough money to fund themselves. Because again, if they're doing all salary, then they can make their may they have got last longer by using at least one of them. And of course, they can only pay dividends if you make a profit. So it's really important to find out what that mix is.
Just thanks for that. Hi, Pradeep. Hi, Janet. How are you guys?
Hi. I've had a nightmare, absolute nightmare. All the best laid plans.
We're all getting used to the new world, right?
What happened? It was working perfectly yesterday. Someone's literally crept in here and done something, I've decided.
I reckon it was. Who was that shirt in the background, by the way?
That was my son, Chief Technical Advisor.
Exactly.
I was like, I need some help.
That was really good. Can you just, hi Pradeep, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. Janet, do you want to tell everybody who you are and where you're from? Thank you.
Okay, so that's fine. So Janet Smythe, I'm an accountant. Just trying to juggle quite a lot of new stuff going on, and some's working and some's definitely not working. So we've got a reasonable client base. A real big mix of different clients from different backgrounds, different industries that we're trying to service, all of them. And so the challenges that are going with that. So nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Janet. Appreciate that.
Hello, Janet.
Hi.
Pradeep, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, love to. Yeah, hi everyone. I think I know a couple of the faces there. They're familiar. It's nice to see all of them in front of the screen at the moment. Now, before we were all sitting around the table, I have to sprain the necks to look at each other and talk to each other. But it's nice to see everyone there.
Are you trying to say this is better?
Sorry, what's that, Jacqueline?
Are you trying to say this is better?
Oh, yes, definitely much, much better. Right, a little bit about myself. I've known Chris, I do. A transition coach. Now we are going through the biggest mother of transitions in our lives, and my focus has changed. It used to be pretty much the case study shows where people are going from a full-time vocation, running a business, to a semi-retirement to a retirement phase in their life. But all that seems to have sort of taken a backseat to what we're trying to manage now. So the things that I used to do has become more relevant with my clients in terms of handling how to accept the change, how to flow with the change. What I've found lately over the last few weeks with the shutdown, lockdown, social isolation, so many words to remember nowadays, is that people are coming from different angles, responding differently. Some are petrified, some are paranoid. Some of them actually embrace the changes, and it's something that I've encouraged all people that I deal with and speak with. And I've actually made an effort now to actually go out and reach out to people. Just pick the phone up and just say, hello, how are they managing? Just to take the mind off all the deluge of news that you're getting constantly bombarded throughout the day. And it's very unhealthy for people. And also being in a social isolation, people have started developing unhealthy habits.
Pradeep, I've lost you a bit, mate, but while you come back, Simon, what are your thoughts on the case study, mate?
Okay. Well, my first question really would be sort of around the health status of the family, because, but particularly as Pradeep has mentioned, in terms of health at the moment, predominantly, and people's health are being affected by this shutdown, there might be underlying issues that they haven't taken into consideration. So do they have appropriate insurance and healthcare to cover any eventualities that might exist? The fact that from their perspective, I'd like to know more about hobbies and what Steve really wants to be doing in terms of really with his time. It's quite clear that Peggy enjoys doing what she does, but if she was to give up work completely, what hobbies would she be encouraged to do? And I suppose there's also an element of legacy in relation to the children, and potentially if they've got grandchildren as well, in terms of them having businesses. Is there an element of support? So rather than using, if they're eligible for the coronavirus business support stuff, that financially, rather than going to the banks and taking out a loan, which they might be turned down for, would there be an element of investment or agreement that the parents would want to do in relation to these particular businesses?
Yeah, so would potentially Steve and Peggy want to make an investment to support moving forward? Could be an idea. Okay, thank you for that. Hilary, thoughts on the case study?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So the questions I would have asked about the first case study, Steve and Peggy, are very similar to the ones Peter would have asked. However, one question I did wonder about was the age of the children and their families. And I wondered whether the Virginia and Tony of the next case study was a daughter.
Yeah, you know what they are. Even Peggy's kids, Virginia and Maggie's. I'm sorry, I've changed the name halfway through, haven't I? That's why Virginia and Janet are Steve and Peggy's kids.
Okay, so right. So it's not Janet, it's Maggie.
Well, Maggie's the mistype. It's Janet. I think. Janet.
Okay.
All the way through. Yeah.
So that being the case, question I'd be interested in is the extent to which Steve, perhaps not so much Peggy, but Steve might be interested in getting involved in their businesses and supporting his children in their businesses in his retirement. For the next one, it seems to me that Virginia and Tony are going to need some new clients with the EU grant drying up. Yeah. Question about Edwin, whether he should be furloughed or not. Seeing he's the commercial director and they need some new clients, what else could he be doing at the moment? Doesn't it make sense for him to be thinking about new business, new clients and current clients instead of just going off and being furloughed?
Yeah.
And then with the last case study, it seems to me that for Janet and whatever her name is, Janet and Janet and Scott.
Janet and Scott, yeah.
Janet and Scott. That at the time, when they're not able to do any work, one thing they need to be thinking about is how do they innovate? In fact, that's true also of Tony and Virginia. Actually, at this time, how do they innovate their business?
Yeah.
But for Tony and Janet and Scott, it's also a good time to step back and think about business and think about where do they want to be in 9 months' time. So we may not have come out of the recession by then, but if they can start making preparations for coming out, they'll be in a very good position when the economy picks up.
Yeah, really good. I like that laugh. Okay, thanks for that. So, Charlie, thoughts on the case study, mate?
So, in terms of questions, I think I'd want to know what benefits these various businesses had in place already, because that will again, you know, formulate some of my thoughts over what they can do and what support they've got. I think the support they've already got in place. So, what are the policies they have already to look after their employees and to communicate with them? I think the businesses need to spend some time, the employers need to spend some time now understanding what their individual employees' situations are, because some people are going to have issues with caring for children, maybe for older parents, maybe for other dependents as well, to have medical issues, which will mean they'll need to be shielded and will be in the 12-week isolation group. And they need to make sure that their in-house work policies on these things are clear, so that employees can understand exactly where they stand, and the employer's got a very clear line on how they're going to deal with everything. I mean, communication, I think, in this situation is really key. I think they really need to check what their communication strategy is and how they're going to keep in contact with these employees, whether or not they're still working, or even if they furlough them. They need to think about how they're going to keep in touch, because even furloughed employees remain employees, which I will go on to later when we come to have a bit more of a look at the solutions. I think a real key thing is they do also need to really check and be sure that these employees cannot work from home. I mean, I know that suggests the scientists have got no work to do, but I can't believe that it's entirely impossible to do research at home. And I think the government is going to be very tight on what they make their understanding of what is there's no work to do when they come to pay out, because they're going to have a lot of money to pay out, and they're probably going to try and make sure that they don't have to pay out any more than they absolutely have to. So I think employers really need to watch that.
I mean, we'll explore it later on, but that raises an interesting point because, I mean, as you know, Charlie, all of these particular, they're not part of the same family, but all of these individual clients are actually always based on clients of Cervello. Yeah. So we do that because it makes it easier for me to talk about these things in real life. And actually, the graphene scientists based in Cambridge, their scientists are in a lab, like they do lab work. So without the lab equipment, they officially be seen as being able to work from home or not.
Yeah.
I don't think we know the answer yet.
I think you need, I mean, you know, again, if it was my business, I'd be basically trying to figure out what, you know, the work is, and then figuring out whether or not that is, you know, something they can do. And I would have thought, but I mean, I'm not a scientist, but working in the industry that we do research, and not all that research happens in the lab. And it can involve researching various other things. I mean, it's probably unlikely, but I would say that it's certainly as a business worth considering. I mean, the other thing, looking at the catering business is, we're currently getting food deliveries from a catering company, because they've shifted their their business model from to supplying, because they've still got the suppliers and the contacts, and they've just been changing their business up. I really think businesses are going to have to be careful, and already we're hearing a lot of rumours at the moment of businesses that are furloughing workers but still giving them work to do, or are furloughing workers fully in the knowledge that they've still got work they could be doing. And I think the government's going to be really hard on that, really hard.
Yeah. Jenny, thoughts on the case study?
Sure. I mean, just sort of adding to the furlough sort of situation. I mean, the way I've sort of read around it is an alternative to redundancy. So even though there may be some work available for some of these employees, it's not enough to sustain some employment. So instead of making them, even though there is, you know, some work going on, it's not enough to sustain a full employment. So it may be that some employees are furloughed and some aren't, but it's not a sort of a blanket sort of approach, I don't think.
I'll ask a quick question there. If you've got somebody who's doing work, like as you say, you've got half the workforce. No, let me get this right, because I want to just mention the way that I phrased it is what I'm trying to make. If somebody is working from home, they shouldn't be furloughed, should they?
You shouldn't be furloughed, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
But what an employer could potentially do is furlough half of the staff, but half of the staff carry on working.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I think, you know, it's a difficult one because I mean, you know, for us, our nature of work has changed. So instead of us having a lot of bookkeeping, we're doing a lot of other work going on because we've not got the bookkeeping going on because people aren't sort of generating that type of income, but we have got a lot of other support type work. So, you know, the ladies that work for me who are doing bookkeeping, I actually haven't really got any work to give them, but I'm banged out trying to keep up with all the other sort of stuff. So, you know, it is a shift of work, I think. So, okay, so just sort of, I mean, I've sort of missed said, so I might be repeating what people have said. So looking at the Rogers, my sort of thoughts on that were sort of inheritance tax needed to be looked at. Not my area of expertise, but, you know, I would consider potentially pass that on to someone like yourself. I'd be concerned about the 85k threshold on accounts, that they're exceeding that, and in some of their accounts that would need to be addressed. They've got some excess income which can be gifted, so, you know, available for distribution on that. And then I'd be looking at advising on, you know, getting that will situation resolved. I think that's leaving them quite vulnerable there. So they were my sort of main. Oh, the other thing, I just sort of thought he's got some great experience as far as his sort of army work and security work, and I wondered if he could channel that into sort of more sort of charitable advisory work, or like sitting on as an exec position. Yeah. So that was my general thoughts on that one. The nutrition business. So I mean that sort of really did look at the furlough situation, and this has probably already been discussed, but just to confirm that, you know, 0 hours people are also can be furloughed. You can look at an average of what they've earned. Other than that, you look at the end of February earnings, and so dependent on the situation. I think from what I've understood, the revenue haven't said that this is the way it's got to be done, that they are open to a calculation based for them type of people.
I didn't know that.
I would be considering that they haven't got any pensions in place, and suggesting that was something they need to address. And changing their business practice. They're saying that they was quite comfortable that their business would pick up again once this is all done and dusted. And my concerns would be that people would changing their business practices, and maybe there will be more done from home after this, and that they won't be necessarily needed in the same capacity they were needed before in supplying them sort of business lunches. So maybe they needed to look to change their sort of business model to fit something new. And just I've got a note that yes, it's okay to furlough directors, but it is just based on their salary. It's no consideration dividends.
Well, I think I mean, can you argue the point that potentially directors should only be furloughed if they're not contributing to the business still?
Well, the way I've sort of read it is that it's okay for them to be conducting sort of statutory duties, so things that need to be completed by law. And then it was also that I had a conversation with some sort of phone-in experts that we've got, And they confirmed that it was really that to make sure that you wasn't generating income. And as soon as you were generating income, profits, that type of thing, you know, then you definitely cannot be furloughed. But if you were just completing your statutory duties, then that was fine. So I think it's a fine line between the two, to be honest. You know, as far as like you're saying, just sort of planning, you know, where does that sit? I think it's a really difficult one. I mean, the conversations I've had with directors, they've took some of them where there's like multiple directors. We've said, well, maybe there's 5 directors, 4 of them literally aren't working, but 1 is still working and still sort of planning and still sort of turning over, you know, even giving information to me on, you know, on stuff, you know, they are still operating. So we sort of took that type of stance. Sole directors, it's a really difficult one, really difficult. Yeah. So that's where I stood with them. Okay, ARC Technologies. I think I'd already heard someone mention that there was, you know, the risk of the EU grants. Obviously, that's a major part of their business. Then, you know, they really do need to find a different outlet for that. R&D, great. Love a bit of R&D tax credits. That's all good. You know, if they can use that in their other parts of their business as well, it'd be great. 30 scientists furlough. I see no reason why that wouldn't happen. I think that's fine. Like you say, if they need the lab environment, then they can't possibly work from home. Maximum 2,500 on the amount per month, but that is in addition to that, there is the employer's national insurance and minimum pension contributions, nothing on top of that. It is minimum pension contributions. And then I'd just be looking at the grants that are available to them, depending on whether or not, you know, the premises that they've got and what the rateable values are, and tapping into the loans if they need that sort of support financially for their. And again, there was no mention of pensions, so I'd be wondering why they've got no pensions. So it didn't seem to have a lot of in place, sort of long-term, sort of investment-wise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the pensions aren't mentioned, but I'd be worried if the firms didn't have it in place, as it's a minimum legal obligation now. But
yeah.
But certainly the new element includes making sure that you continue with AE pension obligations, because you still need to go.
Yeah.
Friday, thoughts?
Right.
Sorry, Chris, did hear that?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Chris, we missed you there.
What are your thoughts, mate?
Who are you talking to?
Friday.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, I apologize.
Sorry.
A little lost there. Yeah, I apologize about the bleep. I had my internet connection disconnected for some reason. But anyway, I'm back on my mobile. This case study has got something that I can help out with, particularly when Steve, and well, he's retired already, so there are clear signs of where he's got issues that he needs addressing. He's been a career man, 30 years in the army, and then running his business, so he's been quite a busy man, quite active man, and he's facing challenges. So I would actually sit down with him and work through to add something that he's missing already, which is a structure and routine that the work had given him. Now, with this missing, it can have quite a lot of challenges. It can affect his mental state and his health and well-being as well. That's something that we will address and introduce or design a new structure for him. A couple of other things is he's got a lot of time available in his hand, which means that, you know, when he's been busy in the army and his business, he hasn't got any other out of work interests. So that's something that we would explore together, sit down and explain, look at what sort of used to make him buzz. Particularly in the army, you know, he's been a very physical man, so he must be in a very reasonable health. So a key thing is to maintain that health. And that has to be a conscious decision. Otherwise, it's quite easy to fall into unhealthy habits and then going forward. Relationship wise, again, this is a common thing. You know, when you're spending a lot of time under the same roof with the other half, which we all are doing today, relationship comes under a lot of strain. Is really trying to make time and space. It's good that at least Peggy is continuing to work, which means that she's got some independence away from Steve. But when she does give up, then they're going to be together. But you know, at least now, Steve is going to have to design or invent something for him to keep him occupied. Social side of it, obviously, he's probably missed out because when you're in a business, you've got your clients, your suppliers, and your work colleagues who are part of your social network within the work environment. And that's something that he's going to miss. So he's going to have to replace it and find other outplays with people with similar interests. Health, again, you know, for somebody from the army, man, he's probably used to healthy regimes, fitness, and that's something he's going to have to maintain. So again, we'll have to decide with him, what can he do that will give him that outlay. Hobbies.
I don't know how everybody else has found it, but I need to be a bit more focused on fitness while I'm in lockdown, because I'm used to going somewhere to get fit, and now I need to. I mean, my home gym is now getting a bigger workout than ever. But how is everybody else finding that?
Absolutely.
2 weeks rules, right?
Joe Wicks is great.
For me, it's going out on the bike.
Yeah.
So, for instance, last week Friday, did 11 miles, which is the most I've ever done in one go. And doing sort of crunches and press ups at home.
Yeah. Joe Wicks is good, but you're not going to catch me dressing up in a Spider-Man.
Oh, come on.
You're taking the fun out of it, Chris.
A Zoom with a difference.
Sorry. Leave that to Joe. He's got the body for it, I think. What are your just general thoughts? I know you didn't have the opportunity to have a look at the case study. Any questions and points that raised that you'd comment on?
I think for me, it's really sitting down with Steve and talking through conversationally what is important to him in his life, and incorporate it into his new life. And
you, sorry, Wasim, can you hear me? So for you, was there anything, I know you sort of here more to observe the process, but was there anything that you wanted to comment specifically, or thoughts on some of the points that have been raised? What would you focus on there?
I mean, I sort of probably looked more at the first one. Thanks for asking. I think everyone's kind of reiterated, mentioned, a lot of the stuff that I did think about when I did glance at the case, but it was more around Steve and Peggy, current plans, you know, where do they see themselves in the future, their willingness to plan together. Haven't got any details around the state pension. Do they have those sort of projections as well?
Yeah.
You know, what do they see themselves doing, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years versus 20 years down the line when they're less able to? And I think the only other thing is they've got quite a sizable estate. So, you know, what are their thoughts and plans there with their estate, their business? And again, have they used allowances? You know, the willingness, their attitude to such planning as well. So those are just the additional stuff I thought about.
Amazing, thank you, appreciate that. So just a few comments from me in terms of what we focus on. So Steve and Peggy, certainly from the cash side, my current account's fine, because even though it's over the 85,000, it's joint. So actually they're under the £85,000 threshold, so they're fine on that. But because NatWest and Royal Bank of Scotland are both owned by the same corporation, they're over, because even though it's 85,000, it's 85,000 protection corporation, and NatWest and Royal Bank of Scotland are owned by the same business. So I'd leave the nationwide money where it is, but potentially make sure that the money was assigned better with NatWest. I mean, effectively, interestingly, because they're spending less than they earn, they can give the residual away, and that falls out of their estate for inheritance tax purposes immediately. So I'd certainly recommend that they do that. And then from the investment side, they're not alone in feeling nervous at the minute. My 100-odd calls over the last couple of weeks have been all with clients who, to one extent or another, have been feeling quite nervous. But our job, I think, as professional advisors, is to just be a reassuring force at the minute, even if we're telling people to do nothing with their investments, which 9 times out of 10 we're recommending people do. So that's it. But I do agree with the comments that we are going to be in a situation where people are going to need to change the way they run their businesses. Certainly, we're looking at how technology is going to impact ours. When I look at the graphene business, furlough the 30 scientists makes sense, but I wouldn't put the commercial team on furlough, because this is when they should be actively looking for potential new commercial opportunities. It's whether the budgets of the business can sustain that. I think in terms of what somebody made about protection, just one sort of challenge with that. We've been approached over the last few weeks about people to putting new protection policies in place. We've had a couple that have run through and for life cover and critical illness gone through without a problem. But we've also had 2 or 3 where they've required GP reports, and that's not going to happen over the next few weeks because GPs aren't responding. So effectively, just setting expectations about whether people are going to get cover in place or not. I think we need to be realistic. If they've had outstanding health issues, they're probably not going to get it sooner rather than later. And that's really important to raise. I think the catering business, they're going to need to pivot and look at doing something else. And we've seen a lot of restaurant businesses do that over the past few weeks and look at how they do that. So that's fine. And then for now, there's a few bits that I want to explore a bit more depth. But for now, I want to ask a few questions. Peter and Hilary in particular, you've got a couple there. Peter, thanks for sending me a copy of your book, because I really enjoyed it and it was amazing. But I've got a couple of questions based on this case study that I've got that I'm curious about. Because in the book you talk about people writing their own story. If you've got a couple who are trying to define their path over the next 20 years, how would you potentially work with a couple and help understand what their next steps might be?
Oh, well, it seems to me they've got 3 stories.
Yeah.
Because they've got each individual story, but they've also got their joint story. And I think, for me, if I was working with them, I would be getting them to do their individual stories first, and then look at where those overlap and where they don't. And I'm sure Hilary would supplement on her view on that in a moment.
How likely are those stories to have an element of conflict in them, where they're still trying to work out together what they're going to do?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. I think if they don't work it out, the conflict's going to be there, whether they look at it or not. So either they look at it explicitly and trying to come to some accommodation, but there's a management writer who said that at different stages of people's marriages, they need to renegotiate the contract. So, you sign up to one thing when you get married, and, it's all lovely and you have kids and all the rest of it. At another stage in your life, your needs are completely different. So I think this thing about renegotiating the contract at different stages of your life, I think is a really good one. I mean, do you have separate holidays, or do you have all your holidays have to be joint? I think it's those kind of questions that, what are their names? Steve and Peggy, need to look at. You know, what do they do together? What do they need to do apart?
That's a good analogy as well, because as you say, the relationship dynamic is going to change over time, right?
Yeah.
And just reassessing that as time goes on, I think is quite an important thing to do.
I think it's a really important thing to do. Yeah.
Would you do that potentially at sort of specific life stages? Because I know, I mean, and again, when I always think about this stuff, I always revert it back to how it applies in my own life. But when Cassie joined the business, the dynamic needed to change a bit. And, you know, at what point is it worth renegotiating?
I think at any point where one or both of them have a significant change of direction, change of outlook.
Yeah.
It's where the signposts come, really, and whether that's with Peggy potentially retiring over the next couple of years, whether it's they are suddenly thinking about what they're going to do in their will.
Yeah.
Whenever it's triggered.
I think whatever the transition point is, I mean, Steve's already retired. It sounds like Peggy hasn't. So, you know, I think Steve, in looking at what he wants to do in the future, might decide he wants to do a lot of traveling. Well, you know, is that what Peggy wants? You know, wherever they live, which is another interesting question. You know, if they live in London, people want to move out to the country. Well, not everybody wants to do that. You know, so I think there are lots of questions about their life together that need to be looked at probably now or quite soon.
Amazing. Thank you for that.
Just one last thing, if I might, on that. For me, it comes down to what do they want their investments and their life to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, you raised an interesting point about legacy as well. I think that, like, what do you want to be remembered for is the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So therefore, what are you going to spend potentially the next 20 years doing?
Yes.
Jacqueline, you mentioned something that I hadn't heard about that I just want you to elaborate on. What's the Horizon 2020 scheme?
It's a European scheme, but I think it's UK government are involved in it, where companies can get access to funding as long as they can prove that they are a viable business and what they add brings innovation.
Okay, so it's
so from looking at their product, this graphene product, it seems to be invading all sorts of areas, to use that word.
Yeah.
So they might have a good case for doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting because before I started working with the case studies based, I didn't have a clue what graphene was, but apparently it's used in everything.
Yeah, it's supposed to be involved in absolutely everything: buildings, us, and what we wear, how we track our heart, our exercise, etc., etc. So it's supposed to be involved in everything.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Ian, what were your thoughts on the catering business? And if you were working with them, what would you be thinking about as a potential way that they can sustain?
I think it would be about the diversification. I mean, a couple of people have mentioned various things. How is it going to be after? You know, it might not be as busy as before. So how are they going to manage that? And Janet mentioned about planning. I mean, planning is in all of this, and it's about if they decided to cut away from the self-employed and just rely on their employed staff, what would their new breakthrough point, break-even point look like? And then start working from that to rebuild a business model. And it's one of these things where, you know, nothing is off the table. Are we going to be looking at, in the first instance, as people can go back to a workplace, providing lunches in a boardroom, for example, all of that kind of thing, and then it's delivering good, affordable products that meet the needs of the businesses at the time. So when we talk about, who should be furloughed, who shouldn't, I mentioned about perhaps only one, because the other one should definitely be in communication with all of their expecting clients to find out what they think normality is going to look like, so that they can try and predict what their cash flow could look like once things restart. So planning in this is huge, communication in this is huge, and it's trying to make sure that your existing clientele know that you're still there, that you're still willing to support them in whatever capacity they might need. Charlie's comment about I'm actually receiving the groceries directly from a company like this, something I hadn't heard of before, but again, it's another possibility. So it really is having that brainstorming, blue sky moment, call it what you like. How can we use all of this this food that's going to be coming into us, and how can we use it wisely?
Yeah, amazing. Simon, in terms of the challenges you're seeing the businesses that you look after face, as particularly in the sort of catering and tech sector, what are the issues that both Janet and Scott and being company need to be aware of?
I would say the first thing is that people probably have looked at their insurance, and from a catering perspective, as you'll probably find, if there were any clauses in it, one of the clauses that's not included is act of government. So the insurance companies have probably swerved a bullet for any catering companies, because if it was an act of God, they might have been covered, which was an interesting fact. I would also say that in terms of adapting what you're actually offering, again, focusing on the catering side of things, I think it's fine to look strategically into what you're going to be doing for the future. But in terms of your crisis management and what can you do for the short term, that's really quite paramount. So some of the local councils are altering their licensing provision. Currently, we're asking the question about licensing requirements for catering companies to become takeaways. The law allows them, government directive, to, if they're a restaurant or a pub, all they need to do is contact their local planning permission or planning team and say that they're changing their service provision, and that's fine. But there are people that are in the catering industry that are not, that don't fall into that. So with that, as an organisation, we've gone out to our funding boroughs and said, what's the situation re those particular businesses that want to do something for the community, and we're waiting for some responses. I think there is this element of making sure your staff are okay, furloughed or not, making sure that you keep in contact with people and have a presence. So even though you might not be able to do catering per se, are there hints and tips and recipes that keep the momentum going and keep people focused in the mind? With regard to the website design and web provision, organisations seem to be doing extremely well within that particular sector that I've been dealing with. They've been inundated. Their biggest challenge, I suppose, is making sure they're going to get paid. So they've tried to come to some sort of agreement where they take either a greater percentage up front. Some people have done pro bono work. They're happy to do that. Some people are actually focusing on more community type driven things. There is a belief that people will remember the heroes and resent the money grabbing organisations that have taken advantage of people's very, very difficult position.
I think there's I don't know what people's opinion is of this, but certainly the way that we've been looking at this is I'd rather frequent businesses that have done good than businesses that have taken advantage.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I don't know whether people agree with that or not, but certainly our philosophy as a business, and I know a lot of people involved in our inner circle events, you do well and you do good and you never stop doing that, because that longer term actually has, it makes good business sense.
Well,
But
you find some of the corner shops and such like that had been taken advantage on Facebook groups, like I'm on some of the Rainham ones. They have been named and shamed.
yeah, well, we do live in the court of public opinion, right? You know,
Yeah.
To comment on businesses that are potentially doing good. So I think even if that wasn't the case, I'd still do it. But it's interesting how that's perceived. I think you've just got to keep commercial as well. So it's interesting how you carry on doing that.
But this COVID thing, for the couple who've got the graphene research, they could actually gain from this situation, because graphene has got antiviral and antibacterial properties. So if they're linking with researchers who are involved in that, looking at how it could be used medically, they can gain from this situation. They'll still be doing good, but they'll still be helping themselves.
Yeah, which is like all good. You know, will do good is not about sort of just doing good, also being commercial about it as well. Charlie, thoughts on keeping people happy during times of crisis? So we're in a position where you've got potentially a business in the graphene business that's reliant on people who need to be kept quite happy, because they're in a position where they're highly qualified and potentially there'll be a market in the future for them to go elsewhere. How do you make sure that they're being looked after while all this is going on?
I think in my experience, I think the key to a lot of well-being, and certainly financial well-being, is knowing and understanding what's going on. And I think this has been a very challenging time, because we've not known what's going on, and this isn't the situation we've had to deal with. But as we've done in the financial world, we talk about situations like this that have happened before. I think communication is always really important with your people, and with us all as a society, as we've again seen in the last few weeks. So the first thing I'd want to do as a business is make sure that communication channels are open. And certainly a number of the businesses that I know are having morning conversations with their teams. If they're still working, they're setting up sort of morning meetings just for people to have a 15-20 minute chat with everyone, just to check everyone's all right. Because I mean, and I know this having worked from home for a long time now, it was isolating and can be lonely before this all happened. You know, I spend a lot of time going to things like the gym and finding reasons to take myself out the house from time to time, because otherwise you can get you can become very squared in. I think businesses also do have more of an awareness of the stress that people are under. So making sure that they're connected with good information as well is important. So, for instance, Money Advice Service is running and updating very regularly information for individuals on their money and their finances in relation to coronavirus. So explaining things like mortgage holidays, explaining things like dealing with credit debt and things like that. I think that's really important. And I'm actually a bit disappointed the government haven't put more money into publicising the fact they've got some really good information sites on these things. And I think as we get to a stage of people having perhaps addressed their basic needs of things like loo roll and pasta, they're going to start thinking, well, what's going to happen with this money? And you've got to look at furloughing. I mean, it's 80% of someone's salary up to a maximum of 2.5 grand. That could be quite a significant drop for a family, you know, particularly if they're reliant on one breadwinner, or even if they're reliant on two. They could have been very used to having different levels of money coming in. So even though they've still got a job, but they're not necessarily having to work, there are still lots of financial problems. Most people in this country tend to live sort of just about within their means, small margins, and I think this is going to be something we're going to increasingly see. In terms of mental health well-being, again, there are lots of free resources. Mental Health England, Mind have got a lot of well-being resources for individuals at home, and being someone that has suffered with anxiety myself, particularly health anxiety, this has been quite an interesting scenario, and I think a lot of people are going to be very scared and anxious about their own health, their family's health. So making sure that people have access to those resources is very important. Now, some of the benefits that that are provided by the employer, like life assurance, like income protection, will have some resources for people. The life assurance, and sadly I've had this conversation with a few employers, will have bereavement helplines, bereavement support, and I think for people at this time and for businesses, because unfortunately there are going to be casualties of this. Income protection and other policies sometimes come with free employee assistance programs, which again are very helpful. And some of them even come with virtual GPs, which is even better because a lot of us can't get to our GPs, even if it's not about coronavirus. Having said that, employers need to make sure their employees are aware that most of these services won't answer coronavirus questions. 111 still remains the resource, and that's where a lot of the EAPs will be directing people to. In terms of medical policies, if businesses and individuals have medical policies, I think it's fantastic. Private hospitals and private medical companies have handed over their resources and over to the NHS, but that's going to mean that a lot of medical insurance isn't going to work at this time. So you're not going to be able to get anything that isn't life-saving from any hospital, and that's quite important. I think employers also need to be aware of families, particularly those who are currently going through pregnancy. That sounds like it's going to be very stressful at the moment. I've certainly got a lot of friends who know that they won't be able to have their partner with them during the process at the moment, and I think businesses can do a lot to support around that. I mean, for me personally, it'd be an absolute nightmare, I think, coming into this situation with that on my plate. So I think businesses really need to think about the individuals as well. So going through that survey, checking that they understand what the individual situation is, managers calling out to them and speaking to the individuals, because people are going to be going through very different experiences during this time. And businesses need to be aware of that.
Janet, on the fire theme business, if there's a gap between the amount of furlough, the salary, they're out of their own pocket, right? If
you're doing the 80%. You can choose to do 100%, and the company pays the if the 80% exceeds 2,500, then the maximum you can recoup is 2,500. If the company wants to top that up, then that's their choice.
Two questions then. Number one, how did that, and we were meant to have a couple of HR people join us today.
Sorry, Chris, can you just repeat that? I didn't quite get you.
No, sorry, this might be a HR question, not a accountancy question. So if you don't know the answer, I'm relaxed. But
right.
As I said, we were meant to have a couple of HR people that said they was going to join us today. Funny enough, I think they're a bit busy at the minute.
I can imagine.
So they've not been able to.
Sure.
But how does that? How do you square the circle between a contractual obligation of paying a salary of 50 grand a year and the furlough scheme? And what additional funding can businesses potentially get through the gap if they're coming in to cover it?
So as far as the contracted, it's not supposed to be including bonuses or additional commissions or anything like that. So I think it's mainly looking at what is the average salary. So what is average? I mean, I just did a calculation for a company that was on a weekly payroll, and so I took that week at the end of February. But then there were some that actually, you know, it was a bit distorted. So then I've took more of an average for them type, but just kept a copy of that calculation so I can see how I've arrived at that. Sort of,
what he's doing is if there's individuals paying over the amount of the furlough.
Well, if it's over the 2,500. So I think that's the employer's decision whether or not they pay that balance, or whether they stick with the maximum 2,500. I mean, I think it depends on the company's sort of situation, doesn't it? You know, financially, as to whether or not they can do that with no other income coming in.
Yeah.
But also, Chris, don't forget, it's the employee's decision to be furloughed.
That's correct.
Counts here. So they'll need to have a dialogue with their employer and say, well, all right, I earn £5,000 a month. This is only going to get me up to 2.5. Fund from 2.5 up to 80% of my £5,000. The employer will say no. The employer then might say, well, you know, if you're not going to be furloughed, then the other option I've got, so I don't know when we're going to have work coming back in that's in that I can keep you employed.
But then standard redundancy terms apply, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
It will have to be a potential cash payout to that individual.
Yeah, if they don't agree to be furloughed, then that payment, in most cases, is going to be less than being forced to pay them a full wage for a number of months when they actually.
Yeah.
Can I come in there? The other thing to be aware of is that a director or a boss will lose a lot of credibility if they're asking their staff to take reductions and they are carrying on their same salary and still walking off with their very nice bonus. Thank you very much.
I mean, you look at some of the big examples of that. EasyJet have furloughed employees, and I think Stelios walked off with 30 million, didn't they? So you know what? You look at examples like that, and you go, reputationally, what does that do longer term?
Yeah, I mean, Hillary put up a little message to the group a while ago saying people have long memories. I mean, I've not used EasyJet, and I will not use EasyJet because of how they treat their staff.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not right. Avoid Sports Direct when I can as well. But you know, these things leave impressions with us, and if you fall out of favour with a brand as an individual, and if enough people do that, well, then you're not going to be able to get up off the floor anyway.
It's an interesting debate because certainly in our business, in terms of our employees, we're paying everybody, and they're working from home. They're continuing to carry on, but I don't know whether family businesses with certain values at their core are treating this differently to large corporate organisations, but it depends on the leader. We've seen examples on both sides where it's been great and not great. What I did share this with everybody is there's a website that's come up with all of the businesses that have done right by their people and all of their businesses that haven't done right by their people. And I think you see a lot of that sort of social justice coming up and people being quite transparent about how employees are being treated. And actually, rightfully so, I think, you know, that it's going to be important.
I'd add to that though. I mean, you've got to be because we do live in a time of caught by social media. I think we do need to be careful because it's quite easy to get caught up in things. I think, you know, for instance, there are a lot of people at the moment who perhaps feel a little sheepish about their reaction towards Boris Johnson a few days ago to where he is now. And I think in my experience working with my wife, you know, her business, Grant Thornton, was criticised in the paper, in the FT a few days ago for offering workers the chance to reduce their pay to 60%. But that was actually based on the understanding, having followed a survey with their employees, that a lot of them were struggling with childcare. And actually what Grant Thornton were asking them was whether or not they wanted to flex their hours down in order to manage that situation. And they've actually been quite flexible on what that can look like. But the way that the FT reported it made it look like they'd actually sort of said to everyone, right, we're cutting your salaries by 60%. And interestingly, again with that, the lowest paid person for Grant Thornton, for instance, would only just be covered by that full 80% furloughing. So actually, the idea of someone being paid 60%, they'd probably still be earning more than someone that was being fully furloughed. But again, it's perception, and we look at statistics, and we've seen this being talked about with death statistics today, and the way that they're recorded. And people can manipulate information, or certainly, media, social media can manipulate information to give one impression when that's not the reality. So I'm actually really cautious about those work and employer lists at the moment, because I don't think they show the whole picture. And we've certainly found the same to be true in gender pay gaps and various other things, that unless you've actually got the detail and explanation around it, the context, you can get a very, very different impression to the actual reality of the situation.
I think that's fair, actually. I think it's fair. Right, so what I'm going to do is we've sort of asked the questions, we've looked at some of these challenges that these clients face. Peter, if you're sitting in front of Steve and Peggy specifically now, what process are you going to take them through to help them get to the next point?
We're going to look at some stories and again tell actual stories and instances of when they felt energized, when they felt there's been a lot going on, in as much detail as possible, individually, to start off with, Phil, and then start to look at some trends that are coming out and start asking questions like, if you need to have control over an individual project, for example, when you were at work, Steve, where is that happening now? How can you build things in the future where you have that element of control? If it's for Peggy, one of the things that she said she values is the social element. So post lockdown, how can she start building that in? But also while she's under lockdown, how can she start doing that? Where are the things that are important for her on all of that?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? I know that, like, on the social side, we had a Zoom Trivial Pursuit night the other day with my dad in Woolwich and Cassie's mum and dad in Scotland. And weirdly, we'd never done that before. And I think it's creating new opportunities to connect this, because you realise you probably don't as much as you should when you have the chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jacqueline, what were your thoughts in terms of specific questions to provide the
Sorry, I'm losing you a bit.
what specific advice did you provide the members of the case study?
Okay, I think something that hasn't been thought about is the Virginia and Tony and Janet and Scott, with the situation as it is now, in their relationships, how are they managing as couples? And sort of in what ways is the current situation affecting them? I think about my
family business.
Sorry?
As a family business.
As we've still thought about business, but as a family and as couples, how is this situation affecting them now? What do they want their relationship to look like coming out of this lockdown? Looking at, we've talked about their sort of emotional and mental health. Capacity isn't the same for everybody, so how are they managing to keep themselves motivated, keep themselves focused? What are they doing to be kind to each other and show grace? Is that a problem? Have they had issues coming in their relationship coming into this, is that highlighted further by the fact that we're in lockdown and they've got the stresses and strains of the businesses that they're in?
Yeah.
I'd like to know that. What else do I want to know? Yeah. Oh, coming out. We talked a lot about, or somebody, I think somebody mentioned earlier that maybe Peter could get involved in his children's businesses. Do the children want that? Is that parents being employed by their children is a different scale of things altogether. It means its own problems. So do they?
As somebody who specialises in family businesses, how would you? What action do both Steve and the kids need to think about before they even start getting involved with that?
Open, frank conversation. I think with Dad having been in the army, there may be things around control there that the children don't want to have him in the business. Is he going to want to take over? So how can he manage himself if that were allowed?
Yeah.
The dynamic. I mean, I remember some time ago meeting a client whose mother was employed, and he actually said to me he had to tell her off because she was challenging him about why he wanted to buy a cup of coffee when he's abroad.
Right.
He's taken some of the business abroad, and she was like, he had to say to her, "It's my business. I can buy a cup of coffee." I remember meeting them, and at one time meeting them, Mum was in the meeting, and she kept harking back to when he was a boy, how he used to approach things, and it wasn't very helpful at all. So, how to stop being a parent if you are employed by your child is a very challenging thing.
It's interesting. Ian, what specific advice would you give to this family?
Certainly to work together. There's possibilities for the capital that Steve and Peggy have got to help with the mortgages of children, to take a share of the property and become tenants in common. So there's that as an option. That can be altered then through gifting over the years up to the maximums allowable in each year as it changes. For Virginia and Tony, I think it really is look at the health applications available through graphene. There's been a huge call for various research, various opening of facilities that could keep these guys going. So if they can adapt their lab to do some testing, then fine, look at it. Because if they get the money in to do all those tests, then to make Charlie happy, then they can retain the staff at a full salary, they can continue with their full benefits, and it's a win-win. They're providing part of their muscle to aid the health effort, and that they're leaving their employees with everything that they can. Diversifying a little bit. We can make a big thing about McLaren developing this new type of equipment, pre-ventilation, oxygen. If that's something that can be made even better through graphene, then these guys should be onto that like a shot. They should be calling McLaren. What did you find? It's jumping on these opportunities so that they can add to them and get more out of the situation. And again, basically, they're in a very privileged position because through doing their business, they can really give back.
Yeah, amazing, great stuff.
I think, I think with Janet and Scott, it really is, seeing what they can get out of a particular scenario to realign their business. What was their core business up until the 28th of February probably won't be going forward, and it's probably going to be a more diversified business.
Yeah, fair enough.
Just living with the change.
And maybe healthier because of it.
Yeah.
If it's great, if it's more diversified, then potentially the risks of this sort of thing happening again might be less. But Simon, thoughts specifically for you on what advice you'd give this family?
Sorry about that. I'd say one of the comments I would make that's coming, which is relevant to this, but is quite a common thread that I'm encountering with many business owners, is the longevity of the pandemic. And people still are under this impression that it will be over and back to normality within a couple of weeks. And they've not thought about the long haul and what's actually going to happen. So in regard to that, do they have enough money for the business to run for, or as is, dormant, as it were, to some extent, 2 months, 6 months? How long is it going to take for the economy to show some sort of recovery? There isn't going to be a tsunami of people going back to work, because there'll probably be a restriction of a number of different people with health conditions preventing them from going back to work because of asthma, because of etc. So there'll be a rollout, I think, of people going back to work. I think the other aspect is, and it was brought up in conversation with a client this morning, is whether this is a consideration to make yourself bigger or be bought out. So the consideration with the microscopes, would a company like Leica, who are probably the biggest brand that are known for lenses from cameras to microscopes, particularly also in the healthcare system. Many moons ago, I used to actually work for a subsidiary of that particular company. They like buying companies. Is this company, should this company, for example, that's being run in this case study, be gearing up to be bought out? It's not a weakness to sell your business, and in fact, it could be a potential strength, allowing you to go and do something else that you might want to do that you haven't got the opportunity to do. I think as a family, as everyone said, keeping together, but there's also this aspect of we don't know how long we've got to live. Have we got enough money to do what we want to do as the parents, at 60-ish? If they live another 30 years, will everything cover them, and have they got enough assets to give them the pleasurable life they're looking for?
Yeah, and interestingly, what we do for all of our clients, for most of the people on this call, I've shown what we do before. We've run a cash flow projection for every single one of our clients that effectively shows them whether they're going to run out of money again or not. Now, interestingly, Steve and Peggy have got more income than expenditure as it sits today. Their life might change over the next 5 years, where they might decide that they want to do some more travelling. So if they put that into the cash flow plan, and will that mean that an abundance of goods at the minute slowly diminishes as they start to spend it? And the answer is we don't know, but that's a completely fair point. Hilary, what advice would you give the family?
Steve and Peggy, or Tony and Scott? Which one?
Who would you like to talk about?
Who would I like to talk about? I think probably Tony and Scott, actually, because I think there's a lot of potential in the business. I think if they can think about the business, if they can innovate, they could find themselves in a much better position coming out of the recession than they are now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to show that businesses that have done well, or have managed a recession well, actually pick up market share much better when the growth comes.
It's about activity in times of slump, isn't it? Doing the work now so that you're coming out stronger.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So I think, I think they really need to take a hard look at the business and where they want to be, what kind of business they want to be, and then start preparing for that when they come out.
How much of that goes? And just taking that right point of saying, because you could argue that currently we're in a natural point of transition that requires a bit of reflection about you, your life, and what you're planning to achieve.
Oh, I mean, I think there's a lot in that. I think that it's a good time to think about, what are the trends in society that we're seeing? I mean, for example, coming out of retail, there's a lot of people thinking, actually less consumption, thinking about recycling, upcycling. How do they take advantage of some of those kind of trends that we see? And also thinking about, thinking about the business end to end. So actually, if they are now not able to deliver their food, or what, to sell their food, what's the impact of that on their clients? How can they keep in touch with their clients? How can they find out what their clients need now and reconfigure themselves for that? Yeah,
it's really interesting. I mean, the 8 Club, which Hilary, as you know, I'm a member of, have started sending me emails. You're probably getting the same about nutrition, diet and exercise, and
indeed.
That communication, consistent communication, is really important.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's really important thinking differently about your business, thinking about the needs of the customers, thinking about the emotional connection you have with your customers. What's the journey that they're on at the moment? What can you do to meet their needs as they are at the moment?
Yeah. Thanks, Hilary. Appreciate that. Charlie, thoughts on what advice you'd give specifically? Oh, I think your mic's or not. I don't know. I don't know. Charlie, I'll come back to you on that. Janet,
sure. I mean, I think a lot of what I would have considered has been covered, and went really effectively. My sort of thoughts are, from what I've seen, there's been some real, winners and losers in what's going on at the moment, and the people that are the winners are the ones that are adapting and looking at the situation and seeing how they need to change their business. And I mean, I've got a security company, and it sort of fits well with Steve in that, they are literally, banged out. Their work has doubled, where there's things like empty properties. So instead of them guarding them 12 hours at night, they're now guarding them 24 hours a day. So they've had to really scale up. So someone with sort of Steve's experience, potentially, is of quite demand at the moment. So if he wanted to do something, I definitely think there would be opportunities for him at the moment. I think the other, I think what I've sort of definitely tapped into is that, the ladies that I've had to follow, that we're going to, we've put in a structure of training, because you are allowed to do training while you're in that situation. So we've seen that as an opportunity for us to really sort of, gain skills that we've not necessarily had time to work with, because we've been so busy. So, I've got a lady who's nearly at advisor status on Xero at the moment, because she's been completed all the certification through that. And we're sort of catching up every day on how she's getting on. She just does a little bit, just so that, at the end of it, we will come out with something positive from it. And I think that's the important thing to sort of try and take from it.
Well, that's a really interesting point. I think really weirdly, I'm doing a coaching course, e-coaching course at the minute that I just haven't found the time to do. And this is
sure.
So, can I just ask one question on whether security of properties there's a key worker, because
Well, I mean, they've certainly it's been cleared as that fine, that work is fine to do, because in actual fact, I mean, because I did have that conversation with the director, and he was saying, well, criminals don't go into isolation. Criminals do not see this as an opportunity. So actually, you know, the need is there for them to be doing that job, and you know, he had the foresight to invest in quite a lot of you know, PPE and you know, cleaning products, you know, in so much as he asked me if I needed any. He was like, so, you know, he had the foresight to see this coming and to get himself in place with it. So yeah, it's just, there are definitely some winners and losers in this.
Friday, what specific advice would you give the family? Oh, Friday, you need to unmute yourself, my friend.
Yeah, there you go. I was trying to click on my picture, trying to unmute it there. Thank you. I think for me, it's the family dynamics has changed because we are in social isolation. We're finding that we're not able to see each other physically unless you're living under the same roof. And also on a daily basis, we're hearing heartbreaking stories of loss and grief, and also the horrors of world economy inching towards recession. And these are some of the things that are keeping people up at night. So my advice to them is, first and foremost, is communicate, and communicate like you've never done before. We used to be in a life of just being busyness, and we didn't have time for each other. Now we do have time, or we have to make that time to communicate with each other and to support each other, and to also notice patterns of unhealthy behavior, news on a constant basis feeding, and that is not very good for the mindset. It creates fear and anxiety. So it's supporting people verbally, and also if you're able to, which is what we're doing now with my family, is set up a Zoom call. And over the weekend we were connected to 6 families in 6 different countries, and all just connected, and we spent at least 2 hours just playing games and just communicating with each other, and it felt like, you know, we were all in one place. Yeah. So there are avenues open to reconnect with our families at a different level and to support each other, and particularly those who are living on their own and they don't see anybody. It's important for them to be looked after, even just to pick up a phone and just say, hello, how are you managing things? And communication is going to be very important because it's going to keep us all driving closer and closer to each other. So in this case study here, is encouraging Steve and Peggy to maintain the communication with the families, extended families, as well as not forgetting, because you're running a business, to keep in communication with your employees and staff. And that applies to their children's businesses as well. That connection is going to be very vital on a long-term basis. There is certainly a lot of uncertainty about when is this going to end. There's no simple answer to it. It could get worse. It could get over in the next couple of months' time. But you know, how long is a piece of string? So we need to all be resilient and supporting each other to ride this storm. In other words, we've got the technology, we've got the the means to do that.
It's interesting because I said to Cassie, I said, if this would have happened potentially in the 1970s or 1980s, one of the downsides of that would be we would just wouldn't have the technology to cope as well as we can. It's an interesting dynamic. Charlie, if you can unmute yourself, mate. I don't know if you had a
Yeah, sorry, had a bit of a technical issue there. Who knows what? Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are interesting things I've mentioned in the comments. I think one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of businesses saying to me now, and on the various forums I belong to, is furloughing's great, but we might not have the cash actually to pay the people that we're furloughing, because again, even businesses work a bit hand to mouth, and for a lot of businesses, their cash flow stopped altogether. So this is an interesting issue with the government's furlough scheme that I think we're gonna discover. Well-being as well. I mean, an interesting sort of issue, a bit like we saw, I guess, at the end of the wars, is the social contracts, I guess, between employees and their employers, particularly for those that are currently working through this crisis. So those people that are currently, you know, manning the hospitals and you know, stacking shelves in supermarkets and things like that. You know, there's a lot, you probably see bits and pieces going on, but there's a lot going on in terms of their welfare. And a lot of them have valid questions about who's, you know, thinking about them and who's looking after them, and the sacrifices they're making. So I think that might see some interesting repercussions. I also, the big thing at the moment seems to be, I guess, in the more professional circles, is that everyone's like, well, this is going to mean working from home is going to become the norm. It isn't. I think one of the interesting things that might change actually is the dynamic of that conversation. And I'm going to predict something that goes a bit against where it looks, which is that employers might become more interested in people working from home from a point of view that they particularly as leases begin to come up for their offices during this period, they might think, well, we don't need this space anymore in the centre of London and we can save there. Employees, on the other hand, they were finding what working from home is really like. And actually, a lot of people have discovered that they don't like it that much. They don't like the isolation. I mean, I certainly, having worked in both environments, there are some great advantages around my lifestyle from working from home, and I don't have the commute and things like that. But I do miss the office.
Socialisation of it, you miss, isn't it?
Yeah, and you miss being able to have that interaction. And for parents and families, and you know, they're sort of on top of each other at the moment, and I think, you know, that is stressing people out. And you know, there are things, I mean, my wife jokes that in some way she'll celebrate the commute when she goes back in, and they'll, you know, she's looking forward to being back with all those people. So I think people will work from home more. But I think the funniest thing is that everyone seems predicting that employees are going to be the driver. I think employers are more likely to be, and it's going to really change that conversation around.
It could be a cost challenge, because as we know, premises in town is expensive, isn't it? So people might say, do I need a 100-man office, or can I do a 40-man office and have a bunch of people there? Thank you so much for that. So thanks for everybody's input. I really appreciate your time today. A few things that I'm going to do to talk about what we're doing to support both our future as a business and our professional business. So it's an interesting one, because for us it's been business as usual. Our client revenues continue. We've had new clients who have signed up, and not in the consistency as we'd expect of what it used to be a few weeks ago. But we're doing a couple of things that might be worth sharing with you. And again, it might be worth getting some involvement. So one of the things that I talk about quite a lot, non-work related, is kindness. The podcast with my daughter called The Kindness Project that we've done for a couple of years now. And bless her, Charlotte was in her GCSE year this year. So the fact that they've closed down the schools has meant that she's been a bit demotivated and a bit of a loose end. So we've going live on Facebook every day with a live version of our podcast. And over the past couple of weeks, we've had about 4,000 people view those videos. So one of my learns was I'm probably missing an opportunity to communicate for the business using Facebook Live as an opportunity. So we're going to start doing that. We tried our first one on Thursday. I interviewed an accountant friend of mine along to talk about furloughing. We're going to be starting running live interviews on Facebook where people write in questions, and then publishing those videos on LinkedIn every Thursday. And what I'd like to do is, if you feel that you've got something to share with my clients, my audience, Cervello's business, would you be up for, some of you, all of you, whoever, would you be up for coming on board and getting involved and being interviewed by me on that? Charlie, I know you're up for it already, aren't you? Yeah, cool. Yeah, up for it. Simon, would you be interested in coming on? Simon, Hillary, cool. Hillary and Peter. Cool. Again, Janet.
Of course.
Okay, amazing. So that'd be a really good opportunity to get involved. And I know we're seeing I saw on LinkedIn that you published a Zoom video with an accountant recently. How did that go?
It's got quite a few views. Yeah, it was just about. Well, what I did is I did a video talking about the communication piece and just trying to do things a bit different.
Yeah.
So I did a short video on the day of the budget, just after it had completed. And I was supposed to do a follow-up a week later, but because of what happened, it got delayed. And then the package, the Chancellor announced the package. So I thought then it would be a good idea to do a sort of combined video. And we posted it on LinkedIn, Facebook. Now, it's got a few views. I don't know how people have taken to it. Not many have left feedback, but it's just like Chris says, just trying to do a little bit more to be a bit more visible, really.
Yeah. It's that visibility. That's key, and just building those.
Yeah.
Good trust, is it? And on that note, we've recorded today. Again, I'll get Russ, who's recording this, to come out and to you individually. If there's anybody who doesn't want us to share today's Zoom call, please feel free to let me know. And Russ is going to kill me for saying this. We will edit your contribution out. But if you all are, it'd be great if we put some titles on and put some end titles at the back. We've just been delivered some chocolates from home. Who are they from? From one of our clients that just delivered us chocolates at home and a bottle of Prosecco. That's really nice.
Perfect.
So that is one. Did they stay 2 meters away from the door?
Yeah,
That's nice. That's us sorted for tonight. So if you are interested in doing that, however long social isolation lasts for, we'll carry on doing these. And if you're interested in us just sharing it on LinkedIn and copying you all in so you can share it, I'm more than happy to do that. And if there's anything that we can do to support your business at the minute, I'm really lucky to have a really amazing community of people supporting us, including a lot of you guys. So let me know what I can do to help you.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, Chris.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, bye.
Bye.